Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of creating our event calendar. In this lesson we'll be working on creating the registration model. The registration model will handle our filtering of user input and inserting the user into the database. So if you all are ready, let's go ahead and get started. So in our register model, we're going to be getting all the values that we're submitting with our form to our controller, and we're going to be passing those through this validate function or method that's going to be in our model. But to begin with, we're going to set some values that are some properties up here at the top of our object that are going to be used throughout our object here. So we're going to say full name because we're going to be getting that. We're just going to set it to null. And then again, we need first name, last name, and then we're going to have a regex for that. We have an email, password again, and then encrypted password regex, password hash options. So these are all the methods or all the properties that we're going to use throughout this. So this first one is going to be first name, and the next one is going to be last name, because we're going to split this first and last name up. We could just go ahead and submit the whole name as is into our database, and that's perfectly okay, but we're going to split that name up, and then because we're going to check to make sure that they actually submitted a first and last name, and if they didn't, then we'll give them an error. And so I believe that's how I have that set up. So we'll say the real name regex, and I'm not going to really try to explain the regex too much, but essentially this is what this is. So real name regex. Like I've said in my previous videos, I'm not the best with regular expressions, but sometimes I have to fumble around in Google to figure out exactly what I'm needing. I've gotten better though, but I've still got a lot to learn when it comes to regular expressions. So this needs to be a double quote, forward slash, 2 forward slashes, and then in between that the caret symbol, and then in here we're just going to say we're going to check from A to Z for uppercase or lowercase, and then uppercase A through Z, and then it needs to contain at least minimum of 2 to 25 characters, and then we're just going to end that with a $sign, so the whole string, real name regex, and then email. This next one's going to be email, and it'll just be a, we can leave that null, and then so email, and the next one's going to be password, and the next one after that's going to be password again, and then our next one that we're going to need, our next property, is going to be encrypted password. And then the next one after that is password regex. And for our password regex, I'm going to copy and paste in this regular expression. You can pause the video and see what it is, and then type that out. So, and I'll just kind of briefly go over this a little bit. So essentially it needs to contain, I have an error here, it needs to contain beginning at the string A through Z. So our password has to contain lowercase, an uppercase, a digit, these special characters, and then essentially it has to be, like I said, uppercase, lowercase, special digits, or a digit, and special characters, and a minimum of at least 8 characters long is essentially what this regular expression is expressing. And then the next one is going to be So our next property is going to be our password hash options, and essentially this is going to be used for our the password function. So we'll pass in what we need here. So password hash options, and this is going to be an array. This won't be null. This would be array, and this will be a key value pair, and this is going to be for using a built-in function in PHP. So the key is going to be cost, and then the next value is going to be the amount of rounds that we want it to basically hash that password. And we can just say 8 rounds is fine. And then so it's just a digit with not in quotes. And that, I think, is everything that we'll need for our properties list for this object. And so the next thing that we'll need to do is create our validate function, along with a filter function, a few filter functions. So we'll need basically to filter all of our input, which is always good practice. And then depending upon what our filters for us, we'll return an object. Alright, so what we need to do is create our validate function, and this is just going to be a public function because we're going to need to access this one from our controller. So if you're not really sure how public, private, and static methods work, you probably just do a Google search on it or look in the PHP manual. And PHP manual is okay. There's some pretty good comments and a lot of that will kind of explain those further as far as the scope of those methods. And I'm not going to really get into that too much, but essentially a public function, we can access it outside of the scope of this object. A private method is only accessible within this object. So we're just going to create a public function, and it's going to be validate. And this one here is the one that we're going to need to pass in data to, so we're going to accept a variable. This is going to be data, and we'll actually call this object, just so we know it's an object that needs to be passed in. So validate object, and we're just going to set the response to false, and it's going to be false. We're going to return response down here below, and for that, in between here, we're going to filter our response. So we'll just say filter response equals, and we're going to create another method here in a minute, and it's going to be this filter response. And actually we're going to do filter data. We're going to call it filter data, and we're going to pass in that object to that method. And then we're going to do some checking on this. We're going to have some logic statement, an if statement here, saying if filter response, and we're going to say error, and we're going to say if filter error. We're going to say response is now going to equal, and we're going to create another method here in a minute, and it's going to be get response. And that is going to, we're going to pass in the filter response along with a string and a boolean, which is going to be true, because it's going to be an error. This one here is going to say error is true, and this one here is going to be register. So this will all make a little bit more sense here in a minute. And then, excuse me, this next one's going to be else. So we're going to create an else statement. And then if this, so we're going to check a few different things. So this first method is basically just going to be we're going to filter our data, and then if once we filter everything, if there's an error that we return from our filter method, then we're going to go ahead and return that method. And then the next one's going to be else, and then we're gonna check. We need to. Well, let's go. So this will make a little bit more sense. Let's go ahead and build out our filter data method. And so this filter data method, this is just going to be a private method, private function, and it's going to be filter. Excuse me. Private method is going to be filter data, and remember, we're going to pass in our object to this. And this here again, we're just going to have a response that we're going to return, and it's going to be false by default. And then we're going to return return response. And so to begin with, we need to basically we need to check to see that our object contains all of our keys that we're expecting, and then if they're not, we'll just go ahead and set them to null or empty, just an empty string, because all of our filter methods for each one of these keys that should be contained within our object, we'll check to make sure that none of these keys have empty values, and if they do, then we'll return an error that way, and then we'll return that error back to the user and let them know that it can't, it basically can't contain an empty string or empty value. So we'll just say this, and we'll say full name, and we're going to check to make sure it's set, and is set. Again, I'm just going to use shorthand syntax for all of these, so we don't have a whole lot of if blocks and a bunch of spaghetti, and keep it a lot cleaner and a lot more readable for anybody else that decides to come in here and read our code. Full name. So if the object, so then remember, we're passing in full name over here. We're creating full name, and we're setting that full name key to this value, so we need to make sure that that's actually set in that object. And then we're going to say full name, and whether or not full name equals, or if it's set, then we'll say that the object, this full name equals this, whatever's contained within this. If it's not, we'll just say it's an empty string. And we're going to do the same thing for the email, password, and agree. So for all of our key value pairs that we've sent into this object, so this is going to be full name, and we'll just kind of keep in the same order that we have them wrote here. So full name, this will keep it easier to follow with. So email and password, and then password again, and then the next one, it should be agree. And I think I must have forgot to set that one up above. Let's see. I don't know if we were even, if I was even checking that. Yeah, agree check. Did I not? I must not have. Okay, so let's see. Private agree equals empty, and we'll actually put, well, that can stay right there. I suppose that kind of makes sense. It's yeah, for full name, email, password again, and agree. So this agree should equal that, and then we're going to say, see, we need to change these. So this is going to be email. Let's go through and change all these. So email, and this is going to be password, password, and this is going to be password again. Password again. And this is going to be agree. Make sure it's set. Agree. And we're going to need to change that here as well. So we're just going to change all of these over. Password. And email. Okay, so full name, email, password, password again, and email. So that looks okay. Okay, so and then we're going to say first name check equals false, and last name check equals false. We'll set those to false to begin with, and then we'll say if this. We'll create a method here in a second called we're just going to be filter name, and that method is going to filter our name, and we're going to say first name check this, and we'll use that method to basically split up our first and last name. So this is going to be first name check equals this, and this is going to be filter first name, and the next one is going to be for the last name. So first name and last name. So last name. So first name and last name, and then our next thing that we need to do is all the rest of them. We need to run the filters for those. So we'll say email check equals this email. This is going to be filter email, and then we're going to have a password. So password check is going to equal this filter password, and password, this should be password again, equals password again check equals this, and it should be filter password again check, or just password again. We'll just make this password again, and then agree. So for our agree check is going to be this filter agree. I keep capitalizing that. The first A, filter agree, and then excuse me. So response. Now response is going to equal a new standard class. This is going to be an object, and we're going to initialize that object with the key that's going to be error, and it's going to equal false. And then we're gonna go through and check all of these. There's going to be if, so I'm going to say if not first name check. So basically, if first name check is false, then we're going to say response, and we're going to say response first name check is going to equal a string, and we're just going to say invalid, invalid first name. And then we're going to have another key for this object, and it's going to be first name error. First name error is going to equal true. And then we're going to say response error. Error is going to equal true as well. And that should be it for that first name check. And then we're going to do basically the same thing for the rest of these. And rather than typing all these out, I'm just going to do a copy and paste on all these. And which, see. So, and that's just going to be this. And so first name, and then the next one is going to be last name, and the next one's going to be sorry, I just straighten these out real quick here. So yeah, first name, last name, email, password again, and then agree check. And so basically these are all going to contain key and value. So first name check, then last name check, and last name error is going to equal true. And the email check, same thing. We're going to have a key that's going to say email check, and it's going to be invalid email. Email error is going to be true, and then our error is going to be true. And the reason why we're doing it this way is this way, let's say only the first name has an error. If it's false here, we're going to set the error to true here, and then we're going to say that first name error is true, so we know that it's a first name issue. And then we're going to have basically a message that we can display to the user saying that it's an invalid first name, or if it's any of these other ones, whether it's a last name, invalid email, or invalid password, or if the password again. Same thing with our agree checkbox. And that should be pretty much everything we need for that. And then the next thing we basically need to do is create our filter functions for each one of these. As you can see, we're running these. We have all of these methods that we've created here, or that we've called, that we haven't yet created, but we're going to create those, and these will basically do all of our checking for us. And they're either going to return, they're going to all return a Boolean value, either true or false. So if they equate false, then down here is where we're going to do our checking on that, whether or not it's true or false. And if it's not true, then we're gonna set the error state to true and return that, and then that's how we'll know up here whether or not to return an error. So that's why we say if filter response error is true, then we'll return a response, and that response will contain our error message and what kind of error message it is, and then we can display that to the user. So the next thing we need to do is just start creating our filter functions, and these will filter all of our input. So let's do that now. The first one we need to create is a private. It's just going to be a private function, and it's going to be filter name, and this one should be pretty simple. We'll set our response equals false, and go ahead and set it to return that response, and then we'll use a PHP built-in function called explode. We can basically use this to explode a string, and so we're just going to explode the full name, and we're going to explode it at the space that's provided, and it will return an array with us, or to us. So now we can check. We want to check to make sure that the keys exist in this array. So we'll just say, see if it's set. If that first key is set, then we'll set that one to the first name property equals. This is going to be this first key, and we'll say return our response equals true. And we'll just copy this because we're going to do the same thing for the last name. And we'll check to make sure that the second key exists. And if it does, then it's going to equal, or it's going to be set to the last name. The next one's going to be, the next two are going to be pretty similar. And it's going to be filter first name. And we response equals false. And return response. And for this one here, we're just going to use a preg match. So we're just going to say if preg match, and it's going to be this, our real name Regex, and we'll say this first name, and then we'll just set the response to true. And we'll just copy this whole function because we're going to use it for the last name. Now, this isn't completely keeping with the dry method, but I mean it's you know what we can do for this. The next one's going to be filter email, and that's going to be this function is going to filter our email address by doing a DNS lookup, and but first we'll need to basically strip the first portion of the email address, and then check to make sure that that domain name actually exists. And to do that, begin with, we're just going to check to make sure that email is not null or false. We could just check to see if it's string or use a regular expression, but we just chose to do it this way. And we're just going to say if. This is a built-in PHP function that we can pass in whatever we want to filter. And for the first item that we pass in is going to be our email for the filter var, and then the next value that we can pass in is the type of filter that we want to use. So that's going to be filter sanitize email, and we're just going to set this. Don't need to be an if statement. This should be. This will just return the email if it's valid or false otherwise. So filter var this email, filter sanitize email, and then or excuse me, filter sanitize email. I don't know if it gives ID of email filter, so this kind of read through. Filter var array returns the filter data are false if the filter fails. So if do another filter var, and so we're just going to say if filter var, and it's going to be this email again, and then this one here is going to be filter validate email. And so this way, essentially, when we run this function passing in this email that's returned from the filter var here, if this is false, then this is going to return false as well. So here we're going to strip the first part of the email, and to do that we're just going to use a regular expression, and we're going to say email domain. We're going to return it to a variable, and this is just going to be preg replace, and for this regular expression it's going to be the caret symbol dot plus question mark at, and again that will just strip the first portion of the domain name, and we're just going to replace it with nothing, and the subject is going to be this email, and then we're going to use a little concatenation along with that, and we're going to append a period to the end of it, and you just kind of look up emails and how that works. Essentially DNS, as far as email servers are concerned and DNS is concerned, most of the major ones, this is how they do it. They do it behind the scenes. They append a period to the end of it. So check DNSR, and this is going to be email domain, and then the record that we want. So as you can see, string type, and so we're going to check MX record, and we're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to check a record as well. And then if that all equates to true, then our response is true. And that's kind of about the best I think we can do, unless you guys have know of a better method. And if you do, let me know for checking emails short of sending an actual email to the email address to validate it. So the next one's going to be filter. We're going to filter our password. So this is going to be filter password, and let me just do this. Well, with this, our password again function is going to be similar to this password function. So we'll just start off with the response equals false, and then we're gonna use preg match, and we have a regular expression set up above that we'll use for that. So if preg match, and it's going to be this password regex, and this password, and if it does, and then we're going to go ahead and return, we're going to set the response state to true. And we'll just copy this and paste it. We're going to use this similar function for our password again filter. We're just going to say password again and password again, and then the only other difference is we're going to do a string comparison. So we're just going to say if string compare, not string case compare, string compare, and we're going to say this password, and this password again, and response is going to equal true. So if it matches, and if they both are the same, then we'll return true. Otherwise, we'll know that the password again is not the same. And the next one's just going to be our our filter, our checkbox. So this is going to be filter agree and response. Again, we're going to set the response state to false. Return response, and this here we're just going to say if this agree is not an empty string. We could say use the built-in function empty, but this should work just fine for the most part. Shouldn't have any issues. We could do a little bit more evaluation if we really wanted to on this, but it should work just fine. Because technically the agree box, the checkbox shouldn't be sent along with the post request unless it's actually checked. Well, that's good for our filters. And then the next thing that we need to create is a function for handling our responses back to the controller, and this is just going to be get response. It'll be a private function response, and then here we're going to be able to pass values into this. It's going to be data, and then redirect for where we want the controller to redirect to. These are all going to be strings, and then an error, so we can set an error, and then we're just going to say response equals a new standard class, and I'm going to say response. This will be pretty easy. So data equals data, and response redirect equals redirect, and response error. Error equals error, and then we'll just return that response, and that's all we really need for that. And then the next thing that we need to do is we need to write a couple functions to handle basically the registration portion and do the rest of our logic up above. So up here in our validate function, we need to create some logic to handle if this filter response error is not true. And but right now this should be working. As far as if we try checking it, we shouldn't have any kind of issues there. So let's do that real quick. And before we do that though, we do need to change a couple things that we have yet to change. When you come over here and just open up your, come up here to the config directory and open up your routes file, and we need to add a couple routes. For the register route, we'll just copy this one, and so we'll need one for success, fail or error, and let's see, validate, success, and error. So this is going to be validate, success, and error. For the URL mapping, we're just going to say validate. So register validate is going to equal that, and register success. So if they successfully register, we'll show them the success page, and we'll use this method contained in there. And then this one here is for the error state. So register error, we'll show that, and that should handle that. And then the other thing is in our config, or excuse me, auto load file, we need to come down here to libraries, and we need to load the session library. Session library, the database library. We'll need a database for registering our user for saving that information in the database, and they'll also need form validation as well. Form validation, and then form validation. I don't know if we'll actually need that. We do need session and database, and then the other thing is that we forgot to change was in the config file down here. If we scroll down quite a ways, and our, let's see, oh yeah, session driver database, we should have changed that already. And then session save path, it's probably null by default. It's probably set like this. I didn't let you guys know that we needed to change that, and that just needs to be the name of the table that we're going to save our sessions in. And then make sure that the cookie domain is represents whatever domain name you guys are using, essentially whatever one you set up here for your base URL. And it should begin with a period, not HTTP or anything down below. And then that should take care of our config file. So we have the config, routes, and then let's see, so our view, so all that should be okay. And then if we just come up here and if we just do a var dump on our response from the model, so whenever we get a response back, it does a redirect. We're going to be setting some flash data, and if we just check for the response, and we just say we can just check session data, we could just dump the whole session data, or we can just check just what's in the response. And as you can see, we're checking that here too. Is set session data full name. So we'll just do var dump session response, and then that should be good enough that we can submit our form and start seeing our filter data, our messages being returned to us. And I have these as check. Really, probably more appropriate thing would be message, but not a big deal. Okay, so let's switch over to the browser and let's just try submitting our form and see what happens. Hopefully no errors. We might have an error somewhere. We'll work through that if we do. So I'll switch over to my browser and we'll just refresh the page. Undefined index response, which is fine because we're dumping an index that's not available in that session variable yet. But if we submit the form, we should probably, that message should go away. And it did. And as you can see now, we have data, and we see error is true, first name check, invalid first name, last name check, invalid last name, and you see password again error, and all of our other agree error, full name. So first name, last name. So let's just try entering just the first name only and submitting that form. Invalid first name error, true last name check, invalid last name, and let's see, first name, last name. So that's not getting filtered correctly yet, so we have an error there. So email, you just say email at email, do gmail.com, email at gmail, and that was filtered okay. So password check, yes, so there's no email error. So let's switch back and see why. Well, let's go ahead and check our password and make sure that that's getting. So I'll just type in a password and we'll just see if that's working. It did. It says here though, password again, check invalid, password again. So I must have not typed it correctly the second time. might have an error there as well. And our agree checkbox, let's check that. And redirect, so register, so the other one's working fine. So let's go take a look and see why our check see our filter email. So filter email was working right. Yeah, and the one that wasn't working was our filter password. So password regex, this password false equals true, and we'll check over here just to make sure name is password, and let's check up here, make sure all these variables are correct. This password again, this password, check over here, password, so that's okay. Let's see what password again. Everything's spelt like it should be. Password again. Okay, maybe I was just typing it wrong. Let's see. Let's look at our regex. A through Z, a digit. And so it's got to contain A through Z, lowercase, uppercase, a digit, and then at least one of these symbols. And it's got to be a mix of them and a minimum of 8 characters. And I think I had said 6 on the form. Let's just change that to 6. And I am just going to create a password up here that I'll just use. And that should be good. We have at symbol, exclamation symbol. Okay, and uppercase. And it's plenty of characters. So I'm just going to copy that just to make sure I'm submitting it twice the same. Let's just go back over to our form and check it. Yeah, still getting an error. Last name, invalid last name, password again, invalid password. Okay, so let's go back and check everything again. So filter password, filter pass string, compare this password again, response equals true, this password. Alright, so another way we can check to see if we're getting the same thing twice, we'll just change this to this password just to see, because if there's an error somewhere else, then this will kind of let us know. And then this should be this password again. Alright, let's try that one more time, submitting that form. So password again. Yeah, let's see, password again, check. And error is true. And it's coming in. Oh. Password again. This password. Oh, response equals. Let's see. That should be right. Let's see. else. This password again, check. Let's see, password again, check. And the string looks okay. String looks alright. Password again. Let's see. String compare. This password. Let's say else. This password again equals null. Let's come back and try submitting this again. Yeah, password again, check, null. Error, true. So, this password. So why is this password not? This password equals null. Which we probably should do anyway. Okay. Nope, so I set this password to null, this password again to null, and password check, this password, and make password, password again, password again. I don't see any grammatical errors, so okay. This password, response equals true. Alright, so that's not quite right. Let's see. So this really should probably read else this password again equals null. No. The response is true, otherwise the response will be false. True or false. The password again is null. And let's see. Yeah, let's see. So I moved this. So this, instead of preg match, it should be preg match else this password again equals null. So if it doesn't match, then password again is null. Email. Let's see. Password check. Password again check. This password again. This password again. The string. Yeah, so password again, error is true. Password again, check. It's not, it's returning this password. The password again. Response is true. So password and password again are not matching. Password again. Password check. This filter password. This password again check. Password again check. Password again. Password again. Let's password again. And let's take a look. And we're just going to come over here. And I'm going to submit the form. And that's being passed in. Check. Password again, error, true. Password again. So for some reason they're not comparing the same. String compare. I'm not sure why. Oh, I see. Dumb move. Okay, this should be 0. If it's 0, now it should be working. Ah. Okay. Oops. Yeah. So here should be is 0. Because string compare, it should be returning if it's less than 0 or greater than 0, depending, and then 0 if they're equal. And I didn't have the is 0 in there. So that's all that was. Okay. And so let's come back and try submitting our form again. I was starting to wonder. I was like, well, everything else is okay. All the values are being passed in. So why are we having an issue there? So this should be didn't have any grammatical errors I could find. All of our values were being passed in. Sometimes that's the way it is, though. Something simple. Let me move this out of the way. This. Alright, so now if I submit this, this should be fine. Click register. Yeah, so now the only thing is first name error, last name. So we're getting a first and last name error still. Let's take a look at that. And this sometimes is what it is debugging things. So first name check and last name check. The full name, this filter name, first name check. So we're going to filter the name, split it up, and then we're going to check those parts essentially. So filter name. We're going to explode this full name, and we're going to check to see if that key exists. If it does, this first name equals 0 and response is true. This last name, and then response. So response should equal that. Full name, this full name, full name, full name, object full name, filter name, first name check, first name, filter name. That should all be okay. So response. So again, we can just come here and say this first name and this last name. And we go back and submit our form and see what's happening. First name check, last name check, real name regex, this first name, this last name, first name, response equals true, response equals true, and that should be all okay. Real name Regex. There's our real name Regex. A through Z 2 to 25. A through Z. Let's see. Response. Let's say else. This first name equals null. And let's see, this first name equals null otherwise. Kyle, first name error, true. Yeah. So we're still getting that error. So first name, filter first name, if match, this first name, response equals true. Else this first name equals null. And first name, this first name, explode, full name, this filter name, full name, and full name, last name, value full name. This filter name, if this filter name because if it's filter name, response to be false. If neither one of these are there, otherwise EX equals explode. This first name. Response equals true. Oh, here we go. Response, not response, or however I had it spelled. So I was returning something that didn't even exist. So it's supposed to be a response. Okay. Well, that should take care of that. Okay, let's go back and check that. Okay. Yeah, so now that's working. And then depending on if you just send in first name or last name. So now it's just saying a last name error, not a first name error. And then if we enter a last name, then now it's just saying email. And email should be working to email@gmail.com. And then our password. And agree. Of course, we'll get an error, so we'll leave the checkbox unchecked. So all that's working. So agree, error, and email redirect. You must agree to the checkbox. So let's just check that, see if that's working. And yeah, so we're not getting a agree check. So we're getting a error for the agree checkbox. So let's see, filter password. Oh, I didn't switch over. We'll go back to that. Response. This agree is not null or empty. Agree check. Agree. Disagree. And agree. Agree. Register. Agree. Name agree. So all that's okay. Agree. And is not empty. This agree is not empty. Response response. Okay. Error true, password check, invalid password, password error, password again, agree check, you must agree, agree error true. And let's just take a look at our dev tools, and if we have a look there, and let's see, validate parameters, agree on, and it's okay. So if we submit this without, and we check that again, yeah, this is, it's not being passed along with, so so response is false, response, everything's spelled okay there. Let's just return agree. Let's change these back. And this agree check. So this agree. And if we just submit that. Agree check is on. Agree check. String. It's empty string. Otherwise, so agree check. Well, I guess we can just say if not empty, agree. If not an empty, this input post agree. Okay, and we'll just check, make sure it's not empty. Oh, huh. That's why. Okay, so response, I had it set to false. Clearly that's not going to work. Okay, so now that should be working and not giving us an error if we come back over here and check it. So that should be, and so yeah, now we're not getting that error for the agree checkbox. Okay, just a couple simple little things that I had goofed up on, and hopefully you guys caught that while I was doing that and you didn't have those same issues. So that's fixed, and sometimes it's easy to overlook simple things like that. And that should be it for now. I mean, we've pretty much got this wrote out. I'm just a little over an hour in this video, and I wouldn't mind going ahead and writing the rest of this model out and just getting this knocked out. So if you guys don't mind, we'll go ahead and do that. And to do that, really the only thing we have left at this point is just basically get the user registered. So we just have a little bit of logic left, and not too much. So for the next part of this, we need to check our email, make sure it's not in the database already, encrypt our password, register the user, and that's pretty much about it. So I suppose the first thing we can do is go ahead and write a function for checking our email if it's already in the database. So to do that, we'll just a private function, we'll just call it check email, and in this we'll just have a response false. And let's see if I can keep from having any issues here. Okay, so return response, and we're going to write a query, check our database, and that's going to be select. We're just going to select email, and it's going to be from, select email from users. We need to select it from the users table, users, and we're just going to say where email equals question mark, and then we just run a query with code igniter, just going this db query, and we'll just say SQL, and then we need to pass in an array of values, so it's just going to be this email, and we probably should check to make sure the email is not null, even though we've already ran our filter function, and essentially we're checking here, but just to play on the safe side, which is usually a good wise thing to do, so we'll just say if not empty, if not empty, this email, we'll run a query and see if that email exists in the database, and if it does exist, we're just going to check the results from the database, what kind of results, and we can just do that by just doing this. We just say result. Well, this is going to return our result here. So first, when you say result equals this db, and the result num rows is 1, then we'll say response equals true. It's false, but if we get a result, then we'll know that there is that email already exists in the database. So this way we can let the user know that they've already signed up with us. The next thing we need to do is we need to write a script to encrypt our password. So we'll just go private function and encrypt, encrypt password. We'll say encrypt password, private function encrypt password, and then we'll say response equals false, and return response, and then we'll say we'll just check. We'll say if if this password is not null, we'll do it. It's kind of the same thing again. We'll kind of just do a little double checking here, and just in case something silly happened, and we'll say this password is not false. Then we're going to go ahead and hash that password to begin with. So we'll say password hash equals, and built-in PHP function is password hash, and we'll say this password, and the algorithm will just say password default. You could use bcrypt if you want. Do password default, and then we're going to set our we're going to use this password options, hash options that we set up above. So if we decide to change it later, now we'll get to the login section. Basically, if you change this, you're hashing of your passwords during login. When you're decrypting that or can do a comparison, other passwords won't work, so you'll have to build some kind of method to fall back. Just kind of be aware of that. Now we just need to verify that it hashed the password. This isn't absolutely necessary, but I always like to verify. Encrypted is encrypted equals password verify. And this is essentially what you kind of do for the login. So we just say password, because we basically would pass in, let's see, password verify, and then we just need to pass in the password here. So we'll say this password, and we're going to compare it against the hash that we just created from the password, and just to verify that that hash is good. And and then we'll just say if is encrypted, then we're going to say that this encrypted password equals password hash, and then we're going to set the response to true. So we'll just say response equals true. Otherwise, the response will be false. And that everything looks okay. So we'll verify the password. If it did encrypt okay, then we'll return response with true, and that should get us good to go on that. And then the only other function that we really need to write is a function for actually putting the user in the database. So it's just going to be a private function, and it's just going to be register user, and again response equals false. I'm going to say return response. And for this, all we really need to do is just say if this encrypted password, we'll say if this encrypted password, then we'll go ahead and insert it. So if it was able to encrypt, if that returned true, then we'll know that we have a encrypted password, so we can insert the rest of the user information along with their password. So SQL, and this is going to just be an insert statement. Insert into, and it's going to be users, and then use our values. So we'll say full name, and full name, email, and then password. See if I can spell everything correctly. Yeah, fat finger and everything today. So values, and choose some binding, and that should be good on that. And then our data, we're just going to create data, and it's going to equal our array, and that array is going to be this, and we'll just say we can use this full name, or we can do this first name and this last name, and then this email, and then this crypted password, because we want to store the crypted password. So this will be crypted password, and we don't want to store their password in plain text. So this DB, and then we're just going to say query, and you can just do this, or excuse me, SQL and data, and then we can just check, and we can just say if this DB affected rows is 1. This is a function. This affected rows is 1, and response equals true. So response equals true. So if we actually were able to insert that, then we know we were good to go, and we'll just return true. And that should take care of that. Now the next little part, oh, excuse me guys. The next part is the remaining logic after the filter. If our filter response error is false, then we know that we can go ahead and proceed. So we'll just say if this register user else, and here we're just going to return a response, our response object, and for this we'll just return filter response, and then we'll just say if it was good, we'll say success, and error is going to be false, and otherwise we're going to say fail, and error is going to be true. And remember, because we're going to return let's see, username, email, what have you, here in our response, I think. Username, whatever we put into the filter response. Let's see, into our filter response is filter data. So anything that's returned from here, the response error is false. So we'll use that, and that should be pretty much it for the model. We should be able to now submit and log in register a user. So let's try it. Let's try it out and see what happens. So we just come back over here to our form. Let me get rid of dev tools, and let's just try this. So I think I still have my password. I'll make sure we type this in the same. And we'll grab that. Just typing it out over there. Okay, so it's the password, and then password, and I agree, and everything else looks okay. So undefined index response, function require. Let's see what happened. So simple scheduler, users, yeah, it did. Okay, it did log or register our user, and let's get rid of that up there on the top of our page here, that var dump, and let's try that again. We'll say Gmail. And of course, we already registered this. Well, it was email at Gmail. Let's try it again, though. Let's just try it with that. And we'll try that. A duplicate entry. Email at Gmail. And for that, success fail. I think. Oh. That's why. No. Fail. User create fail. Oh. I know why. Okay. So, success already registered. Okay. So, what we needed to do to fix that, if we switch back over, is we needed to check the email first, and we didn't check our email. So we needed to say if this check email, then because remember, check email is going to return true if there was a result, otherwise false otherwise. Else, then we could then we should proceed. We're trying to register a user, otherwise we shouldn't try registering the user if there's somebody already registered with that email. So I'm just gonna copy my password real quick down, and to say filter, and we're going to say already register. Register, and then success and fail. So we have success, already register, and fail. Okay, so that should be good. So check email. Alright, so if we come back over to this and try this again, resend. Yeah, already a member. Hey, looks like you're already registered. You can try logging in. Okay, but we haven't built that part. So if we come back here and we'll say gmail@gmail.com. We'll put our password in. Password. It did probably submit that, and it did work, but yeah, it did, but it didn't take us to our success page. And I'm thinking the reason for that, if this register user success, and let's see, register and register fail, success false, register user, get response filter response, register success, success, success. Otherwise, success is going to redirect back to base to register, and I think that's what happened. So on success, yeah. So it's because we're not setting a flash data here for success. So we just need to say, again, I'm going to put my password down, and we'll just say set flash data, and this should be success. Response, this should be success, and success should be true, right? So we come up here as success, and success is true, then so this should be true. So set flash data success. So now that should be working. We'll grab my password again. We'll just try this one more time and see what happens over here. So Kyle Coots, and then I'm going to say anything at gmail.com, and then password again, and then agree. And there you go. You are registered. Thank you. You may use the email to log in with, ready to log in. So that should be working fine. Now if we browse these results, everything's stored, hashed, all good to go. Alright guys, so that's it for the registration portion of our project. So hope you enjoyed. Sorry this is a little bit longer than expected, but I think we got quite a bit done. And now with our users registered, the login section shouldn't be too much of anything. We'll get that built, and then after that we'll kind of start working on the rest of the app. So hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next part of this series, and we'll just keep coding and keep having fun. Have a good night. Thanks everyone.